He always gets me in mid-position of changing positions. But hi there, I'm Ron Juckett, and he's Drew Douglas, and this is the DoDCast for it's the Turkey Day edition of the DoDCast, even though that's really next week. And I didn't have stuffing and turkey this tonight. I had fish and salad. How are you, Drew?
I'm doing well. How are you?
No, we're fine, thanks, and thanks for being with us on this Thursday night. Remember, this is our new time every other Thursday now. The rest, or until we get Drew's class schedule for the spring, and then we'll probably play around with it again. But for now, this will be our regularly scheduled time for the DoDCast through at least the end of 2017, and it's great to be with you. And the news for the week is there isn't really much news. The coaching staff is in place. I wrote a slider about that. Why don't we start with you giving me your impressions of who they hired?
I really like the staff. I was glad to see that there was some returning members, and Bob Henley, the third base coach, and it's just crazy to me, at least, that he's survived. He's been with the organization for 27 years as a player and now a coach, and just he was on the Matt Williams staff, and then he was on Dusty Baker's staff, and now he's on Martinez's staff. So glad to have him back, but it is a bit surprising, and I'm glad that there is a lot of experience around Martinez, who doesn't have any managerial experience.
Right, and I didn't realize I'm older than Bob Henley. I would never have guessed that looking at him there. I guess the sun really does something to you, but I really didn't expect that he would be the one that would return. But when I did the bios on these people, I was surprised how strong his biography was, with the exception of about 8 weeks with the Pirates back in the early 2000s. He's a lifer. He's a lifer, and so good for him. We're getting some stuff in the chat. We'll get to that, Seth and Judo, in a moment. Kevin Long, I think, is the name that people are going to recognize the most. What'd you think about that?
I was really glad to have him. He's, in my opinion, one of the better hitting coaches in the league, and we saw what he did with Daniel Murphy in 2015 with the Mets. He really turned him into the hitter that he is now. And so I'm sure Murphy is thrilled to have him. Hopefully we see maybe the same kind of thing that happened with Murphy with the Mets, and Kevin Long's able to help Matt Wieters because he's coming off of a career worst season, and he's making $10.5 million. So you'd like to see him be a little more productive, at least offensively, next year.
Right, and if you really, I was going through his work with the Yankees, there was one of those teams that scored over 900 runs. Holy goodness gracious! And so with the firepower and the speed this team has, it's possible. I think they're not all as slow as some of those Yankee teams were. Derek Lilliquist is the pitching coach. He comes over from St. Louis. They've had good pitchers over there. Took over for Dave Duncan. I guess overall, Tim Bogar is coaching at first. Henley remains at third. Chip Hale is the bench coach, except for Henley. They're all in their early 50s, and they all have something to prove, and they all have tons of experience in different positions. I mean, this, for a young coaching staff, it just seems to be full of stability.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially with the managerial experience. I know Bogart managed a little bit in Texas once Ron Washington was dismissed, and he has some other minor league managerial experience, and Chip Hale managed in Arizona. And so I think there's a lot of great experience around Dave Martinez, which should be beneficial since while he is a very experienced coach, he has never managed before. So I'm very excited with the coaching staff that Mike Rizzo and Dave Martinez have put together.
Do you get a sense from reading through the tea leaves of who they picked about outside of the fact that this is going to be a lot more of an analytical coaching staff of how they're going to approach the game?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's very analytical. Just I'm not sure too much with the actual coaches, but with Dave Martinez, he's worked alongside Joe Madden for he's like 10 years now, and he's done some kind of unconventional things, such as like batting his pitcher eighth, and at one point he had pitchers playing left field. So I think maybe we'll see a little bit of that with Dave Martinez, but I mean, I guess it remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a learning curve, but because the division is the way that it is, they get some break from that, because I don't think anyone is going to catch up with the Nats next year. I'm not saying that as a homer, just saying that that's the rest of the division. Seth said, hi, Seth, how are you? If Dave Martinez does not work out, I think Bob Henley should be the manager. I think Dave Martinez gets every chance to work off that $2.8 million they're going to pay him. They don't eat salary for anybody. They may not pick up his option, but I think Dave Martinez, unless the bottom just absolutely drops out, gets his 3 years. Don't you?
Yeah, I think so, and I do think he'll do a good job. So I would expect him to definitely be there for the 3 years and possibly the fourth year in the option.
Yeah. Seth got his cast off finally. Congratulations. Glad you feel better. Let's start with this because they're talking about in the chat. We'll get to the immaculate one in a couple of minutes there. Judo. Giancarlo Stanton. He's rejecting a trade to Boston, reportedly, as Seth says, and the Cardinals. I wrote a piece saying that it would be fool's gold for the Nationals to do so. What do you think? Where do you think he's going to go? I mean, he's obviously going to go. If I was Stanton, I would not reject a trade of the Red Sox. I think the Red Sox are a World Series capable team. I mean, isn't that what Stanton wants? I don't really see that for him potentially in San Francisco, at least not in 2018.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the Red Sox were a team that he wouldn't accept a trade to, but I think really what it comes down to is he wants to go back home. He's from the West Coast. We've seen him linked to the Giants, the Dodgers, the Angels possibly. So I think he's looking at more of those West Coast teams. He'd be a good fit with the Dodgers. They've always kind of had a surplus of outfielders, but obviously they have the money and they are willing to spend. They had a taste of the World Series this year, and to get a talent like Stanton, maybe that's what puts them over the top. So I don't know. I would expect him to probably go to one of those West Coast teams, and I don't really think he's a fit with the Nationals.
I don't either. I think you have to give up too much for him. I think that the Miami is going to make whoever take him will get that contract. They're not paying for anything for that contract. If they are, the cost will be astronomical. Seth says, I'm still saying that the Angels all the way, and I guess I would kind of agree with that. Could you imagine Mike Trout, Albert Pujols, and Giancarlo Stanton in the same lineup?
Yeah, that'd be an incredible lineup, even with Pujols' decline.
Right, absolutely. And thanks for the nice words, Seth. Hello, Al. How you doing? Judo says, Nats having a good offseason so far, all building up to break our feeble hearts in October 2018 again. You sound like a bunch of Red Sox fans circa 1985. Oh, wait, that would be me. Oh, yeah, Seth says, oh, yeah, Justin Upton stayed with the Angels, too. All right, let's talk about the awards. Max Scherzer wins his third Cy Young Award. I mean, his place in Cooperstown was pretty much solidified before last night, but you've really got to think that number 3 punches his ticket.
Yeah, I would think so. I know he's one of only 10 pitchers ever to win at least 3 Cy Young Awards. He's one of 6 to win it in both leagues, one of 6 pitchers to win it back-to-back years. So, I mean, he's really put himself in some elite company. And of those 10 pitchers that have won it at least 3 now, the other 9, 7 of them are in the Hall of Fame, and the other 2 are Roger Clemens and Clayton Kershaw. So,
yeah,
I don't know if
Clemens will get in.
Yeah, I think Clemens will get in, and Kershaw is probably a lock to be a first ballot once he retires and he's eligible. So I think, yeah, Scherzer is just about a lock at this point to make it into the Hall of Fame one day.
But we were talking about before the show, there was some discussion on a message board about him winning 300 games, and you said he's only won 141 in his career?
Yes.
There's no way he's going to win another 100. He'd have to win an average of 16 a year the next 10 years. And he's 32, 33?
Yeah, 33 years old.
I know. No, I think he's got an outside shot at 250. But I really think 250 will be the new 300. I think 200 gets him in the Hall of Fame anyway. But you're right. I mean, Kershaw is the best pitcher of this generation. And Clemens, I think as time moves on, opposition is softening. To him being in the Hall of Fame. And he should be. I mean, he was, and I remember the years when he was fat. He was a Hall of Fame pitcher. When he slimmed down, when he went to the Blue Jays and started to, allegedly take some B12 shots in his rear. is what was when his numbers got silly, but he was a Hall of Famer before that. Ryan Zimmerman won Comeback Player of the Year. That was the Players Association award, and with that, Scherzer, I believe, was the players' pick for National League Pitcher of the Year. I saw Rendon in the MVP. Rendon finished 6th. Harper finished 12th. I don't have it in front of me. Zimmerman finished 22nd, or was that Gio that finished 22nd?
I think it was Zimmerman.
Okay, pretty good run by there. The key, of course, to Zimmerman is being healthy.
Yeah, I mean, people were talking a lot this year about how he was working with Daniel Murphy in the offseason and improving his launch angle, because in years past he was hitting the ball hard, but he's pounding it into the ground. And I think maybe that had a little to do with it, but I think the main point was just he was healthy. Over the past few seasons before 2017, he's been very injury prone, and when he's on the field for an extended period of time, he's one of the best first basemen in the league, but if he's not getting the consistent at-bats and he's battling injuries, obviously he's going to struggle. So yeah, I think the big part of this year, which led to him becoming the Comeback Player of the Year and earning some MVP votes, was just he was healthy for once.
Absolutely. And Rendon, I wrote about Rendon today. I mean, he's just stuck behind some great players, but I really think that he just was the most consistent player and the most valuable player that the Nats had all year. He played in 147 games. The stat that struck me the most today, he played in 87 of the 97 wins, and he hit 350 in those games. And he will never win a Gold Glove because he's stuck behind Arenado. But he just goes out there and is the most unassuming superstar I've ever seen. I don't think he would consider himself a superstar, but just unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think he would get a lot more recognition too if he was more of a national figure, but it's just kind of in his nature. He kind of shies away from the press. Whenever he is doing an interview, he gives his teammates all the credit, and he just really doesn't really want all that fame and everything. And so I think if he was more of a national figure, he would get more votes possibly. But this year, I mean, we saw he wasn't even an all-star this year. He's a final vote candidate, but ended up falling short to Justin Turner. But I think he's really one of the best players in the league, and he certainly was the Nationals MVP this year.
He's my favorite player on the Nats. I've really grown to love Anthony Rendon. You can book that. When we did Ricky's goodbye gift, and I had to sneak in, well, who's your favorite player? So I could get something for him. Well, who's yours? And Rendon was the first thing that popped into my head. He really just impresses the ever-loving snot right out of me. Seth asks, what's the likelihood of the Nats signing or trading someone while we're on the air? Not tonight, but when we do the nightly shows during the winter meetings, I bet we will. If were you with us, Seth, last year? Drew wasn't even with us last year. The first night, we had live shows every night through the winter meetings. I'm not sure if we'll do nightly ones this year or not, depending on what the Nats decide they want to do. The first night was the Chris Sale night. And we went on the air that night at 9 o'clock, 95% sure that trade was going to happen. Actually, it broke during the show that trade was going to happen. And they were going to go get some Chinese food and celebrate. And so I remember waking up. I couldn't sleep that night for whatever reason. I remember waking up at 5:30 in the morning, checking Twitter. I mean, that's just such a wonderful way to start your day. And the trade hadn't happened yet. And I went, what? I mean, this was a done deal. And we all know what happened. So it won't happen tonight because it's too close to the holiday. But I'd venture to guess, Mr. Ross, that sometime before we start playing again, that we'll actually have news break while we're on the air. Judo says Kershaw is the only active player with a shot at 300. I agree with that. He also says that 3,000 Ks and 3 sides should get max there. Yeah, absolutely. And he also has an interesting stat. Chris Sale, Steven Strasburg, Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, and Corey Kluber are all on pace to finish with more Ks than Nolan Ryan. Wow. I don't think they'll beat Ryan just because simply they're just never going to throw the innings. I mean, Ryan, I believe, one year struck out 383, but he didn't, like 290 innings. And if anything, the amount of pitchers are going to throw are going to shorten, I would think. But maybe on the other hand, we saw so much bullpen action that the bullpens were dead tired by the World Series. That's a question for another day. And Judo says, I literally love Anthony Rendon. Okay, so you want to comment on any of that?
Yeah, I don't think anyone will pass Nolan Ryan, especially guys like Scherzer. I mean, I don't know, he's just kind of a whole other pitcher in his own, but he's just thrown so many innings and everything is just 110% with him. So I don't know if maybe he declines in these last years of his contract, but yeah, I don't think anyone, or at least not most of them, won't pass Nolan Ryan.
4,000 would be tough, just because you're talking about 200 innings being a major accomplishment now. I mean, Scherzer led the league in strikeouts with what, 268?
Yes.
Which is a fair number. I mean, he's going to, 250 a year is still an admirable number. But the way that starters go in this day and age of someone, they're throwing 110% on every pitch, as opposed to saying, but the mindset when Al and I were kids was that, you're okay, I need you to go 8 innings. I need you to get the bullpen there. So take something out that fastball, throw in the early 90s or the low 90s, pitch to contact, get your strikeouts when you can, and just let the game kind of come to you. And today it's like, look, if I can get you 7 innings out of you at most, 6 innings really, go out there and give me everything you can for 6 innings, and we'll call it a night, which is about 110 pitches. It's just such a different philosophy now. I just don't think they're going to throw enough frames to get Ryan's 5,700 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Al asked where I think Joe Girardi will land. I guess he's going to MLB Network, according to Seth. I think I can see Girardi taking a year off. I was surprised to see that Hal Steinbrenner said even if the Yankees had won the World Series, Girardi's job wasn't safe. I wonder what the backstory is there. I mean, they made it to Game 7 of the American League Championship Series. Okay, Seth was just guessing he was going to MLB Network. Ricky and I were talking about this before. We both thought this was his best job as a team. I don't know what the disconnect is with the Yankees. I mean, if he had come to Washington and we had taken him with open arms, I don't understand why there isn't any real interest in Girardi, and the Yankees are kind of making a mess out of this. Alex Rodriguez, Raul Ibanez, the popcorn vendor, and the judge in judge's courtroom. And I don't get it. I really don't.
Yeah, I think there's got to be something going on, or something that went on that we just don't know about. Because I mean, this was a team that wasn't even supposed to finish 500 and ended up 1 win away from the World Series. And I mean, if that doesn't keep your job safe, I really don't know what will. That's something you'd really see with the Nats. So we've seen Dusty Baker did a great job and lost his job.
Right. I think a lot of that was economics. I mean, Baker was going to, Martinez is signed for 4 years for $2.8 million, according to the Post, plus incentives. And Baker was at $2 million a year and was going to get a raise. Roy Judo says Ryan pitched 26 years. Don't see anybody doing that. I don't either. I think Max and Kershaw have a legitimate shot at 4,000. More so Kershaw. Yeah, I think the Kerbot can do 4,000. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Bryce Harper. Are you surprised? I did a piece on this that Mike Rizzo openly talked about wanting to re-sign him. I know it seems kind of Tim McCarver, Captain Obvious there, but the Nats never talk about possible free agents. I mean, the fact that they signed Ryan Rayburn was kind of a surprise. I mean, they never talk about anyone about to do that, and that told me a couple of things. A, I think that they have a really good chance of keeping him. I guess that would be where I would start with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that because, I mean, usually Rizzo doesn't say anything, and all of his moves, especially the big ones, are something that just kind of come out of the blue. I saw with Scherzer, really heard that they might sign him the day before he actually did sign. So I was surprised, but at the same time, I feel like with Harper, is like you said, it's really obvious that they were going to at least try to re-sign him. So maybe this is an exception for Rizzo, but yeah, overall, I was pretty surprised to hear him talking about it publicly.
Seth says he's not worth 500 million, and he doesn't really like Harper's defense. Harper's defense is okay. When he's healthy, his arm is great. I think he'll probably get around 400 million. People accuse the learners of being cheap. They're not cheap. They're stingy, and there's a big difference in that. I mean, they'll say, okay, we're going to spend X amount. They've had the highest payroll in the division the last 3 years, and they certainly will for the next few. I believe that the 2019 numbers already estimated at 149 million without Harper. But I think they're finally understanding that if they don't spend the money on what they've created, that they're going to lose out. Seth says he saw 350 over 8. I think the Nats would do that in an absolute heartbeat. And I'm sure, but it tells me that something will get done. And I had a line in the piece and I took it out because I don't know what the case is anymore. If the deal used to be, if the deal was announced after opening day, so let's say they made this deal on St. Patrick's Day, for instance, but they don't announce it until the day off between the games in the Red Series, that his annual average value of the contract, which is how the luxury tax is computed, doesn't count for the upcoming season. If it goes on so the hit would be in the next year, not this year. Now, I had that in there and I took it out because I'm not sure if that's still the case or not. But if that is true, that's what I would expect. That they'll have a deal worked out in place, kind of like what we saw with the last buying out his last year of arbitration. That the deal will be in place and will be announced as soon. If it doesn't affect the competitive balance tax for this year, they'll wait till after the season starts to announce it. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just going back to the salary, I mean, if he wants to sign for $30 million a year, I'd happily take that. But once you start getting up to $40-50 million a year, which is what he's reportedly asking, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think any one player is worth that. We saw when he was hurt towards the end of the year, their offense struggled a little bit, but I mean, they were still winning games. And I think if he does leave, they will go out and get more of a starting caliber outfielder to take over. But I mean, I don't know. Just with the new CBA, I don't know that giving $50 million to one player is really going to be that effective.
Well, in 19 and 20, Mr. Scherzer's making $42 million a year. So they've already kind of priced that in. Now, 2 players at $80 million is a lot of money. But, we saw what happened to the offense after Harper got hurt. He was having an MVP year. Seth says, my only concern is, can we re-sign Murphy? I suppose they will want him to take kind of a hometown discount. When they signed Kevin Long as the coach, I really think that that really was a carrot. I mean, they'll offer him some decent money for sure, but they also have a replacement for Murphy in place in Wilmer Defoe. As far as I'm concerned, Defoe does the super utility role in 18 and is your opening day center fielder, or a second baseman, not center fielder, a second baseman in 19. I think they have to get Anthony Rendon situated away, and I really think that is the bigger long-term goal, is to get Rendon maybe through his last year of arbitration and 3 or 4 years of free agency. That's just me. I mean, I like Daniel Murphy, but I think if I knew that could sign 2 of the 3, it would be Rendon and Harper who I would sign.
Yeah, I think signing Rendon definitely has to be a priority over the next 2 years. His contract expires in 2019, and he's really, like I said earlier, he's the Nationals MVP this year, and just kind of under the radar superstar. I think you could get him for cheaper than he's probably worth too. So I think I personally would definitely re-sign him over Murphy, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what the Nationals end up doing.
Yeah, I think it's a case of I think the ownership now realizes that spending money, the luxury cap is not tax is not as terrible as what they thought it was. They know what this team can do, and all the extra money, if they do make the playoffs, is huge. And I think at some point in the next couple of years, there's going to be some forced resolution in the Masson thing too. John the Third says, set aside the money we're going to use to re-sign Harper, put it into a keep the Metro open during big games fund. I like that, John. I like that. You know what? Major League Baseball has a de facto rule that when things like the whole Metro mess and other cities with transit, that they the instructions are to the teams, don't spend that money. Let a sponsor do that for you, which is why I forget who it was that kept the Metro open during an extra hour during Game 5. But you'll never see teams do that. I mean, they should, but they won't do it. They won't do it. Seth thinks with Murphy, I think he's saying that to test the eventual drop the asking price. Seth asked, now that award season is over, do you think players will start signing soon? I think after the holiday. I think Kurt Schilling is the only one I remember who really broke tradition, and that's only because Theo Epstein went and had Thanksgiving dinner with him down in Phoenix. But you got to go back to 2003. I don't see any real signings happening now until we get together again the week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think maybe a few minor league signings. We saw the Nationals re-sign Ryan Rayburn to a minor league deal, but yeah, definitely nothing big until after the holiday.
I think the Nats had the key things in place with the coaching staff. There's still no bullpen coach.
No, they got Henry Blanco.
Oh, the catcher.
Yeah, he was the Cubs quality assurance coach over the last few years, and now he's going to be the bullpen coach.
Quality assurance coach. That's like when you buy something from Best Buy and it's got the sticker on there. That's Henry Blanco. Putting stickers on the back of your computers and iPhones. That's an interesting choice. And that obviously is leading him to being a future pitching coach, which some of the best pitching coaches in the games, such as Dave Duncan, were catchers. And Blanco David Ross was Lester's personal catcher, but Blanco certainly fits in that personal catcher role. So yeah, Seth, a couple of weeks. I would think by the time that we'll be together with you on November 30th, unless something happens. And so maybe about that time, things will start to move. I was surprised that Rayburn signed so early, but no, I think teams want to know what they're going to do, and I think the Yankees probably need to get their managerial situation switched away. That's interesting. Ricky Ankiel is the Nats life skills coach. That's quite an interesting story. I remember the playoff game where he pitched and just had that absolute meltdown. Couldn't find. I mean, that was just heartbreaking to watch. You were I don't think you were born yet, or if you were, you were in diapers.
Yeah, I remember watching him play for those early Nationals teams, but
yeah, as a center fielder, yeah. But he was one hell of a pitcher with tremendous potential, and he basically just got stage fright on the mound in a playoff game, no less, and just could not find the strike zone. And he tried to pitch after that, but they eventually shifted him out in the outfield. All right, I want to talk a little bit before as we get to the end of the show. So if you got any other questions for us, shoot them at us. Roy Halladay, who passed away since we've talked to you last. Something about baseball players and being their own pilots. 40 years old. Oh my goodness. My everlasting memory, besides of him just doing wonders for the Blue Jays every time they faced the Red Sox, was of course the no-hitter against Cincinnati in his first playoff start in the NLDS in 2009. Just kind of out of the blue. Never thought I'd see a playoff no-hitter. There only had been the one Larson's perfect game in 56, which, no, Drew, I wasn't around for, but thanks for thinking about that. to see that and just be in awe of that. I mean, just to be how calm, cool, and collected you would have to be on that big stage. The Phillies were defending world champions, as a matter of fact. That was the year that they lost to the Yankees. No, it's 2010. That was the year that they had lost to the Yankees after they were, at the peak of Ryan Howard's power, and just to shut down Dusty. Who the manager was Dusty Baker for the Reds. And Seth says, yeah, he tortured the Nats. He was the only National League East team that he had double digits wins against. And of course, some of that has to go to the fact that when he was with the Blue Jays before the Expos moved, they played interleague every year. Your memories of Roy Halladay?
Yeah, just like Seth said, just him always torturing the Nationals. But I mean, I don't remember too much of watching him play, but just what I've read and heard all these former players and all his former teammates talking about him, it seems like he was a great player and just an even greater person. We saw like he was coaching youth teams. The day before he passed away, he was back with the Phillies talking to their minor leaguers. And it just seems like he was just a great person who lost his life way too soon.
You can always tell, we all say nice things about people, especially when they pass, but you can genuinely tell a nice person by the reaction of their peers on Twitter. And I got on Twitter a few minutes before that press conference to announce his death. And people were beside themselves, like the night that Robin Williams died, and the night that Steve Jobs passed away, or something, and that type of impact on people. And he will be missed. And even though he's not eligible this year, I really wish that the Hall and the baseball writers would remove the rule and put him in this year, because he's going in. Here's a guy that's, he's won 200 games, but his 63 complete games, I believe, whatever it was he's done in this decade, still was like second or third, or maybe even leads with complete games in this decade. He hasn't pitched in 4 years. I mean, it's only 40. My goodness gracious, 40 years old. I remember 40. All right. Any other questions from you guys before we wrap it up? Drew did some magnificent pieces, and we want to thank you very much. We've set another record for page views in the first 2 weeks of the month, 100,000 page views for the month on districtondeck.com. What an amazing, amazing number. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Most of that was on Drew's guessing of the 12 free agents that the Nats had, where they're going to go. For the two people who might not have read that, is there a tidbit you want to drop on that? On, anything that, we start writing these things and we don't really know how they're going to come out until we finish them. And was there something that kind of surprised you when you wrote it in your thought process?
Nothing that was really too surprising, but just covered like the top free agents from that list. And obviously Ryan Rayburn already re-signed on a minor league deal, but the top guys there, at least currently free agents, are Jason Worth, who played 7 years. Since I wrote that, we've heard maybe he'll come back on a 1-year deal in a lesser role, kind of come off the bench, provide some veteran leadership. Brandon Kinsler, some sites are predicting he'll come back to the Nationals, but I'm not sure, because he was an all-star closer with the Minnesota Twins before being traded to the Nationals. So I think someone will give him a shot to close, and I think if the Nationals want him, they're going to have to pay him closer money to come back and pitch the 7th or 8th inning.
Right.
And then Adam Lind, who we saw, he did a phenomenal job as the Nationals' backup first baseman this year, but the Nationals surprisingly turned down his mutual option. I think he's going to become a free agent regardless, because he was going to turn that down. But he is a free agent now, and I think he deserves to be a starting first baseman or designated hitter somewhere. So I think he's probably gone unless the Nationals pay him starter money to only play in a reserve role this year. So I think probably all the Nationals' biggest free agents are most likely leaving, but I think they're still in a great position to win in 2018. I trust Rizzo to go out and get solid replacements, and the guys that are returning are great players as well. So I think they will be in a good position in 2018, regardless of who leaves or stays.
Right. I don't think there's any make or break free agents in there, but nice to have seen them do something with Lind. Just because he can fit into a lot of places. He's not the optimum left fielder, but he didn't really hurt you that much in left field. Then again, I'm not a huge fan of all those advanced fielding metrics. because anyway, that's just me. All right, so let's see. Our writer Sam Phillips actually will touch on who replaces Adam Lynn sometime in the next couple days. We'll have sliders coming up for you, and of course, it's Thanksgiving week, so we hope that you all have a happy and healthy holiday, and we will talk to you in a couple weeks. District on Deck on Twitter is @District on Deck. Give us a like and follow us on Facebook. We try to remember to post everything there. I'm not as good as certain former co-editors with that, but I'm trying, man. I'm trying. Of course, we'll do this. We'll be with you again the last day of November to talk about whatever's happened in the last couple of weeks. And you can follow Drew on Twitter at
DrewRD98.
You can follow me at Ron Juckett, Juckett. And I will spare you the pictures from my birthday party. And so for Drew, I'm Ron. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks, John. And we'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.